When the police first arrived at the scene, the room was silent, heavy with the dense, metallic scent of spilt blood. A single beam of early morning light filtered through the rain-streaked window, illuminating the shattered glass across the carpet, and the overturned lamp flickering dimly. In the center of this chaos, the body of Richard Marrow lay crumpled on the floor, his right hand smeared red, trailing a single trembling line to the wall. There, written in a bold, trembling scrawl, one word stood stark against peeling wallpaper: Harris. Detective Emilia Grant, seasoned but never jaded, had seen her fair share of what men and women were capable of when cornered, frightened, or furious. She moved quietly, scanning the stretch of the word on the wall, the way each letter grew weaker, the blood thinning out. The victim had written the name at the last possible moment, with only his own lifeblood as ink. The officers on site were quick to circulate the news. Richard Marrow had named his killer with his dying breath. Or so it seemed. Within the hour, Julia Harris was brought in for questioning. She wore a long black coat, raindrops clinging to her hair, and her eyes were wide, shocked but clear. She and Richard had been business partners, publicly amicable but reportedly at odds over the direction their company would take. The evidence on its face devastating. Julia's card had been found on Richard's desk, a small thing but suggestive. No sign of forced entry, and only 2 coffee mugs, both still warm, placed by the side table. Julia's prints were on them. Still, she insisted she left hours before the murder, and her alibi was murky, her calls unattested by anyone. And yet, even with all this, Emilia felt the frisson of unease. The scene was too tidy. The synthesis of evidence, the cannonade of motive and opportunity, the final accusation scrawled by the victim's own hand. It was almost too perfect. Forensic officers noted that Richard's body was found slumped a full 4 feet from the name on the wall, sprawled in a way that suggested he had to drag himself, blood flowing from a single deliberate stab wound to the side. Not a wild, brutal killing, but surgical, planned. Emilia stood in the center of the room, letting the evidence speak. How did Richard know to write Harris? Her mind flicked through the standard explanations: revenge, hatred, epiphany. But Julia wasn't stupid. Would she have left so much pointing her way? The coffee cups, the desk card, an argument on record, if she was going to kill her partner outright? Or had Richard, in his final moment, tried to frame someone? But then, inertia took over the investigation. The newspapers got wind of the dramatic detail, the last words written in blood, a narrative made for headlines. "Victim identifies murderer from beyond the grave," screamed one paper's front page the following morning. But Emilia dug deeper. Richard's personal effects were ordinary. Wallet, watch, a pen, his phone cracked from a fall. The phone's last outgoing call had been at 9:34 p.m., precisely 13 minutes before his estimated time of death. He had dialed 911, but the line had barely connected before dropping away. Just an intake of breath, a rustle, then silence. She listened to the 911 tape over and over. Nothing but static, and a brief, wet gasp. Searching the apartment yielded clues thin as onion skin, except for one unremarkable object. A mirror above a small shelf near the door, slightly askew. She noticed something odd. When standing at the victim's position, the mirror reflected a sheet of paper pinned to the adjacent wall, opposite the name scrawled in blood. On it, written in large, unmissable black marker, was the word Harriers, the name of the consulting firm Marrow and Harris had founded together. Emilia chewed on this. Could Richard, half-conscious and delirious, have reached for the word he glimpsed reflected in the mirror, abbreviating Harriers to Harris? Was this truly an accusation, or the fumbling grasp of a dying man for anything at all, to name his killer. Her suspicions grew. Family interviews were next. Richard's brother, George, recounted a call with Richard just hours before the murder. Richard, he said, had seemed distracted, worried, muttering about a hidden betrayal. But George also offered a small detail. Richard was dyslexic, severely so. Spelling names correctly was always a struggle, and he often defaulted to phonetic spellings or abbreviations. It was another layer of static over the supposed clarity of the blood-written name. Despite all this, the case was moving toward prosecution. The DA's office, eager for a swift, open-and-shut case, remained adamant. The public and press were convinced the victim named the killer. That alone, in the shadowy world of criminal justice, carried more weight than 1,000 pieces of circumstantial evidence. Emilia, unable to shake her doubt, reopened the crime scene herself, this time after dark, alone with a small flashlight. She retraced every step, every movement in the room, from the table with the coffee mugs, to the dead man's outline, to the wall, to the mirror, and finally, to the window through which that first morning light had filtered. That's when she found the second anomaly, a faint, undisturbed layer of dust on one section of the windowsill, marred by a single missing line about 15 inches long. The kind of streak left by a rectangular object, like a box or a book, recently removed. No books, no boxes were inventoried at the scene. Emilia looked at the police photos from the morning. Yes, there, in the margins, almost out of frame, sat a small, leather-bound notebook. But it was missing now, vanished from the inventory. She made inquiries. Nothing in evidence, not with the detectives, not in Richard's effects. Pursuing every thread, Emilia reviewed security footage from the neighboring buildings, which showed a shape, indistinct, but moving with hurried efficiency. A figure exiting the side door of Richard's apartment complex at about 10:10 p.m., only minutes after the estimated time of death, carrying what looked like a small, dark object. Could this have been Julia? The figure's outline was hard to identify, not Julia's build, not her stride. Someone shorter, stockier. And then, analyzing the timestamp, Emilia saw something else. At the exact time when Julia's car had been documented leaving the parking garage, an entire 20 minutes before the murder, the thread began to unravel. Next, Emilia delved into the company's recent financials. Richard and Julia's firm, Harrier's Consulting, had been struggling. Projects delayed, invoices unpaid. But then, a sudden influx of funds appeared, just days before the killing, funds that had come via a shell account linked to someone named Edward R.S. Digging further, Emilia tracked the account back to another employee, Ramon Edwards, recently let go with a substantial grudge against the partners. Interviews revealed his bitterness, replaced by outsourcing, owed back pay. Emilia requested a warrant for Ramon's apartment, and inside she found the missing notebook. Its pages didn't just contain meeting notes, but a meticulous plan to frame Julia Harris. There, in Ramon's tight, neat handwriting, were lists of the partners' habits, details of when Julia typically stopped by Richard's apartment, and, most chillingly, notes on how to mask as Julia, from taking her mug from the office kitchen for the planted coffee to swiping her business card for the desk. Even more damning, there were several trial signatures, attempts at recreating Richard's handwriting and crude sketches of how a wounded man might write a name on a wall, even if barely conscious. Emilia's heart raced. The pieces finally connected. Ramon had waited until Julia left, knowing she would serve as the perfect scapegoat. He had confronted Richard, stabbed him surgically, not to kill outright, but to incapacitate, to give him just enough time to drag himself across the carpet, to reach the wall. Then, using a gloved hand, perhaps even forcing the weakened Richard, he had guided the man's fingers to write Harris in blood, before stealing the notebook and fleeing the scene. Once the plot was revealed, further evidence poured in. Fibers matching Ramon's jacket were found on the underside of Richard's desk. Camera footage, enhanced and cross-referenced, placed Ramon at the building at the precise time of the crime. The narrative shifted overnight. Headlines changed, from the drama of a blood-written confession to the shocking reality of a murder framed to look like an open-and-shut case. But the story's lesson lingered, whispered in the halls of the police department and repeated in homes and courtrooms across the city. Even the most convincing clues can be shaped, staged, and used against the innocent. The drama of a name written in blood is potent, haunting, headline-worthy, but in and of itself, it is not proof. The world is eager for certainty, for the simple logic of cause and effect. But as Emilia Grant knew, and as this case proved, the surface never tells the entire story. In the search for justice, especially when a human life is at stake, every clue must be weighed, tested, and never, ever accepted without question. Behind the thin red line of letters, behind the drama and the spectacle, there is always more than meets the eye. The aftermath of the case rippled across every aspect of Emilia's career. Julia Harris, after narrowly escaping wrongful conviction, became an advocate for caution, speaking often about the need for thorough, unbiased investigation. She rebuilt her life slowly, finding solace in the mundane routines of living. Coffee brewed in new mugs, new business cards printed with care. Ramon Edwards was brought to trial, tried not only for murder, but also for the deliberate manipulation of evidence, a crime seen as nearly as egregious as the act itself. Years passed, but the echo of the blood-written name lingered. Academy cadets were taught to challenge the obvious, to see with new eyes. Emilia visited classrooms, community centers, sharing the lessons of the case. Trust your instincts. Never stop asking why. The truth, messy, unpredictable, will only be found by those with courage to look beyond the surface. And in the end, the confession that Richard Marrow appeared to leave behind was revealed not as a damning accusation, but as the echo of a man's desperate struggle to be heard in his final moments, a struggle hijacked by another's malice. The name, after all, can only tell as much truth as those who read it are willing to see. Stories like this transcend the particulars of time and place. They whisper through every system where justice and injustice hang in the balance, reminding us that even the most damning evidence can hide a deeper deception. They remind us of the fallibility of perception, of how easily narrative can override nuance. Every detective since has remembered the lesson. The victim wrote the killer's name in blood. But the truth, as always, went much deeper than that single crimson word on the wall.